Wiping out Nasrallah is one thing. There was 20 other top commanders of Hezbollah. Do you have any insight? Can you offer any insight as to, okay, that's cutting off the head of the snake, but this snake's head often grows back. Who would be coming up through the ranks? Would it change anything?
The short answer is that Israel has done this before. They have killed the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah in the last 20, 30 years. And yes, there's a blow for the group initially, to be sure. Far more people rise up the ranks, often far more radical leaders emerge. In terms of who will be the leadership in the coming months, it's impossible to say right now. But the inevitable outcome of all this, when you kill, as Israel has done in Gaza, tens of thousands of civilians, as you are killing people in Lebanon, resistance, opposition will grow. And I think many of us in the West, and this is not by any means a belief in support of Hamas or Hezbollah, far from it, but inevitably resistance will grow. How can it not? If you speak to a lot of Lebanese, as I have, who did not traditionally support Hezbollah, many Lebanese do and many don't, in Lebanon and in the diaspora, they are enraged with what Israel is doing because their neighbourhoods, not so-called Hezbollah neighbourhoods, are being decimated. Their civilians are dying. This is how you build a long-term insurgency. So Israel's desire or dream to redraw the Middle East, which, by the way, also includes, as some of them have said, the ultimate goal, which was the ultimate goal of neoconservatives after 9/11, was to overthrow Iran, to have regime change, militarily or some other way, in the deluded belief that that would bring Israel, the world, the West, more safety and security. The Iranian regime is a brutal bunch of gangsters, no question about it. But the idea that somehow striking Iran militarily or trying to overthrow the government, as, by the way, just yesterday, Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, possible Prime Minister in future, has openly said, we now, as Israel, should bomb Iran and bring regime change, which in the last 20 years, anyone who's looked at history in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, regime change militarily will be an utter failure and disaster, principally for civilians in those countries.
Well, Netanyahu's not exactly dovish in his tone at the moment, and he's aggressive in his strategy. Do you think that's what he is doing here as well? Regime change? Is that the aim when he's talking of retaliation?
Look, when Netanyahu's been speaking about Iran, you can go back to his speeches literally from the 1980s. It's been pretty consistent. Iran is the ultimate devil. We have to try to destroy it in some way. And at the moment, Israel is off the leash. There's no one stopping them. That's been the case now for a year. The US gives them carte blanche. I would argue Australia has done pretty much the same, beyond Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese occasionally expressing concern, but essentially it's carte blanche for Israel. Australia's not supporting sanctions on Israel as they did within the 24 hours of Russia invading Ukraine. Netanyahu feels like he's in the ascendancy, that his popularity in Israel has gone up again after being down after October 7. But his long-term desire and meaning in Israel to redraw the map will actually result in disaster, because when you kill leaders or huge amounts of civilians, there is massive blowback. That's what history tells us, just within the last 20 years, let alone decades before. And Israel, I was recently in the Middle East and spoke to lots of people in Israel and Palestine. And what the general consensus there was, of course, different people have different views, is there's fear, to be sure, but in Palestine itself, where I was, there was just not just anger, but just disillusionment that so much of the world, including the Arab elites, by the way, have let Palestinians down. Not one Arab country, Laura, since October 7 has cut ties with Israel. Not one. They've been critical. They have not cut ties. And they won't, because this has been a long-term trend that Palestinians, tragically and outrageously, are seen as somehow expendable. But none of that, none of this will bring Israel or Jews globally safety. It's the opposite. Anti-Semitism is soaring globally in some parts. And I have said for a long time, long before October 7, this doesn't justify it, but Israeli actions play a part in this. How can they not? Yeah. When people have seen every day for a year on their phones, Israeli soldiers raping Palestinians, TikTok videos of Israeli soldiers in Gaza attacking Palestinians and torturing them.
That's been put down to propaganda.
People, right? Pardon?
That's been put down to Hamas propaganda. And
But
just
this is
as,
Israelis doing this, Laura. This is Israeli
yeah,
soldiers on TikTok putting their own videos out. That's not, I mean, it's propaganda from the
yeah, for
Israeli
sure.
side. That's not Hamas putting that out. That's Israel putting that out. Israeli soldiers, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, as kind of a way to dehumanize Palestinians. That has an impact globally, believe me. And it's going to be a whirlwind against Israel and Jews for decades to come.
Antony, it's really interesting every time I talk to you because I feel like your view is a minority view among Jews at the moment. Do you accept that?
I would accept that it's not the majority. Yes, I've come to terms with that over the last 2 decades. But I would say that in the last year, in the Jewish community globally, yes, the majority mainstream voices, I would argue, are very hardline. I would argue deeply antagonistic and racist towards Palestinians. But there is a growing cohort, particularly of young Jews, and that's not just an opinion, but based on polling, US, UK, elsewhere, that are so disillusioned with Israel, who say not in my name. So it is a minority, but it's a growing minority. And that minority is making the older generation scared because they have believed that it's a Jewish responsibility to defend Israel, right or wrong. And when Israel is killing so many civilians and occupying Palestinians for over half a century, I'm sorry, that is against Jewish values. And as Jewish New Year is happening today, and we all hope for a better year ahead, this is one thing that many young Jews that I know are saying not in my name to what Israel is doing in the Middle East.
Antony, it's always good to talk to you. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you.